Welcome back. I'm talking to Colin Saunders about his UFO experience. Now then, Colin, I'm just looking at the drawings that you provided in your report, and the lights, you were so close to these four red lights that you actually managed to see some detail within the lights. Can you just expand on that?
Now, I've always called them lights, but I don't think they were lights, and they certainly weren't what I would call propulsion units. I don't know what.
So you don't think these were engines or anything?
No, I don't think they were engines at all. No. There were four lights in a row, and I concentrated on the fourth one, the one highest from the ground. Now, as I stared at the light, I could see there was like a crisscross effect on the light, on this red light. The crisscross effect is like you'd get on a lens of a car, but I don't think it was manufactured. Now, over the years, I've done a little bit of experiment with a laser beam, and I've seen, like, if you look into one of these laser pens, you can see some light, some crisscrossing coming into the light. Now, I'm not sure, but I think it's something like Newton's law of ring interference, something along these lines. So I think the lines that I was looking on at the light were produced from the light itself, from the laser effect of the light, rather than being manufactured lines on a glass dome or something.
Right.
Now, the other thing I've learnt over the years, looking at these lights, it was extremely bright. Once it had gone, there was no damage to the eyes at all. You could see everything fine, even though the brightest laser you'd ever been looking at. I have been told that when you use your eyes, there's cones and rods, and they use red lights in submarines because it doesn't affect a part of your eye. You can come out from a submarine and still see in daylight, whereas if it was daylight in the submarine and you came out, your eyes would take more to adjust. So part of what I was saying, that although these lights were really bright and I was staring at them, there was no sort of damage to the eyes or any images left when it had disappeared.
Okay. So you feel it was maybe not a conventional sort of light then?
That's correct, yeah. Yeah, I've never seen anything like that. I've always liked firework displays and things along these lines, and this was better than that. It was like just astounding, quite astounding. In
many ways, this experience changed your life, and you became a UFO researcher. And you've investigated predominantly triangular craft cases, but you know, we've been talking before the interview, and Colin's got a lot of knowledge of different UFO cases. You were involved with Graham Birdsall's talks in the early 2000s, and you also met Stephen Greer.
Yes, yeah.
So you have become known locally as someone who's interested in UFOs and had this experience. So people have reported some of their cases to you. So can you give us an example of one, Colin?
Yes, certainly. And just first of all, I'd like to say that I've been quite encouraged by the response I've had from local people. Nobody's really knocked me on this subject, and majority of people have had some experiences in their life, and they're quite open to telling me about it. Now, in the early days after the incident, I had a guy introduced to me, a local guy who lives here in Hinckley. Now, back in the 70s, this guy drove from Nuneaton to Hinckley on his motorcycle, a journey that would take about 10 minutes. Now, as this guy came into Hinckley and was approaching what is the British Gas headquarters, Transco in Hinckley, his motorbike lost power and it stopped in the middle of the road. And he stood there straddling his motorbike, and he looked up and he said that a triangle came over the gas board, over the Transco, and slowly over his head. Now, initially he said it was the size of a football pitch, and then he thought about it and said it was bigger than that. It was 1.5 times the size of a football pitch. Underneath the triangle, about a third of the way down, there was a glass dome, but he couldn't see any occupants in it. Now, this huge triangle came over Transco, and it came over him and headed towards Hinckley town centre. Now, I've tried to dig out from the newspapers reports on it. I can't find that particular instance. But when the triangle had gone, his motorbike started again. He kicked it up, went home, and he'd lost 1.5 hours in time. He woke his parents up, he told them about it. He phoned his girlfriend back in Nuneaton to confirm the time that he'd left, and it took him 1.5 hours to go from there to home. And after all these years, 30 years on, he was telling me he still doesn't know what took place or what happened. But he definitely lost that 1.5 hours time. Now, he kept that quiet for 30 years. He only told his family. But once I came out with my own experience, then he came and told me what had happened to him. And there have been quite a few people over the years who have come to me with their own experiences, and it's quite phenomenal the amount of stuff that is going.
I had a case reported to me from 2005 of a guy who again had missing time, having witnessed a triangle, and not only that, he has a physical mark on his body that that appeared after the day that he'd had the missing time. So, I mean, is that something you've looked at, Colin, at all? Abduction?
I've researched abduction, yes, and my feeling is it does take place.
Right.
I can't say that we was abducted on the night. It was certainly a strange experience, especially with the close viewing. But I do have a sympathy and an empathy with people who are abducted. It does take place, and they've got nobody that they can really report it to. You know, it's not something you go talking to down the pub to people and things like that. So I feel sorry for those people. They are genuinely being taken, yeah.
Right.
And I do know there is a big cover up on all of this. I know it's real. I've met so many people now who have got the same experiences and give you the same sort of details. You can collect it from all over the world. We know it's going on. I have a bit of an interest in cattle mutilation as well. That's a fascinating subject. We know it's all going on. It's all hushed up, but you know, I do feel a little bit annoyed with the governments for not telling us more about what's going on.
Now, you've actually attended quite a few UFO conferences. Just tell us about that, Colin.
Yes, in the early days, obviously I was fascinated by the subject. So UFO magazine was in production then, Graham Birdsall. He was one of the first people I spoke to actually when I had my experience. I got to know Graham quite well over the years, and I'd go to the conferences and I was just astounded by what I was learning. I did bump into Stephen Greer at one of these conferences, and he said to me that he thought the triangle that we got, or the experience that we had, was a proper alien triangle rather than the back engineered one.
Right.
I do believe him when he says that we've manufactured our own triangles. So, but he did sort of confirm that he thought ours was a genuine one rather than a military version of the same. Right.
And what was that due to the fact that it materialised just from static lights, or
from the information I told him, and also from the outer body experience which I mentioned to him as well. Whether it's outer body or something else, I don't know yet, but I keep an open mind on that. But he was pretty convinced it was the genuine article.
Do you have a feel for where these triangles are originating from? For example, some people think there are underground bases, some people think there are bases in our own solar system, undersea bases, that kind of thing. Do you have any feel, Colin?
Yeah, I've thought about that quite a lot, even from day one, to be honest. I mean, this huge triangle that was going away from us, I mean, I was thinking, where does it go? Where does it come from? And one of the things to note, the small triangle that was really close to us, the detailed viewing that we saw, this thing was squeaky clean. It looked like a car that had come out of a showroom. It didn't any miles or turn. There was no burn marks on it, no entry marks coming into the atmosphere or anything along these lines. And I wondered, like, when the large craft was disappearing, where they go to. Do they spend their life going around the dark side of the planet just trying to hide, or logic told me they must have bases. So as everybody does, you research on the internet, you find similar cases in different countries, and you'll find things which keep cropping up that tell you that it's going to be true. There's a lot of talk about bases on the planet, and it would seem to me quite logical, and I go along with that. I do believe there are bases underground, North Poles. There may even be bases on the dark side of the moon. I think there's quite good evidence towards that as well.
Right. Presumably then, the military must know about this because they have more advanced satellite systems, radar systems. They've got bases all over the place in the UK. So what do you think their policy on it is, Colin?
The same as they've been saying for years and years. It's no threat to UK airspace, so we're not interested. That really is just a cover up to say, yes, we know they're here, there's nothing we can do about it, we're just going to leave them alone. As long as they're not doing any damage or attacking a city, then we don't see it as being a threat. They're not saying they're here, but they're not denying that they're here.
Yeah.
I think they can just come and go as they please, to be honest. The one that we seen, they were so low, I think even the large craft would probably been under radar.
Yeah.
But as for coming and going out of the planet, I don't know. I mean, the one that materialised in front of us looked like it was coming from another dimension. So maybe they can arrive without travelling through the atmosphere and alerting the authorities that they are here. But generally, I think throughout the whole world, they know they're here, but there's not a lot they can do about it. They're keeping tabs on it, and they're just watching what's going on, basically, and coming out with the same old spiel, no threat to UK airspace.
And you've done a few TV appearances in your time regarding your sighting. And how have you found that, and how do you find the general coverage of the subject?
Very good actually. When you get down to sort of street level, if you like, normal people, and get away from all those involved with the UFO world, it's very accepted by people. I've been on telly quite a few times, and people in the hometown see that, and like I say, a lot of them then come and tell me the stories about what's happened to them in the past. You know, it's not always UFO related, but the amount of paranormal experiences that go on is incredible, really. So as far as the general population is concerned, it's received really well. There's a lot of people out there who are believing in it, and who have had their own experiences. I've done a few conferences as well, and people have come and spoke to me at conferences. I wish I'd made notes of it all now. I could have written a book on stories that people have told me. One or two of them can be a bit scary, but in general, most of it seems to be quite positive. And for me, it's been very positive.
Now, you mentioned the word paranormal there, which is a word I'm not fond of, to be honest, Colin, because it kind of, it's not very scientific in my opinion. It's kind of, it's very woolly. I would tend to just use the word undefined or unexplained or undiscovered even. Tell us about what you mean by that.
Well, prior to my experience, I'd had no experiences of any sort in my whole life. After the experience with the UFO, for the first few weeks it was quite intense, and then it started to slow down over the next few years. But I was experiencing what I could only call paranormal experiences. Some of them were UFO related, others were not. They were like ghostly type entities, if you want to call them that. Not entities as such, but you know, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I did have a bit of an experience with an invisible creature at a riverbank, which was quite scary, I have to say. It leads me to believe that on the night something happened particularly to me. Whether they changed something in my mind or actually did something to my brain, I don't know. But for the first few weeks there was quite a lot of stuff going on.
You go along with the out-of-body experience phenomenon. You would say that people do have out-of-body experiences, would you say?
It's a strange subject, but it's like the UFO. You don't really believe in UFOs until you've had an experience. Now, once I've had the experience, researched on the internet, I see other people having similar experiences. I can tell generally whether they're telling the truth or not. Now, the same sort of thing, I mean, I found that very difficult to cope with, being basically an aircraft engineer, spent quite a lot of time on aircraft, worked in North Sea as well, and I've travelled the world quite a bit. It really was quite a shock that night to see that UFO, and I have to say it probably took me a year to 18 months to calm down from that, because it just changed my thoughts on life and perception of what everything is about. Just
tell me the three things that came into your head that you told me before, when you first saw it.
We were sitting in the car in amazement, watching the lights, and then this craft materialised, and as soon as it started to float into the air to reveal that it was a solid object, there were three thoughts that came instantly to my mind. My first one was, my God, aliens do exist. The second one was abductions must take place. And the third one, this explains all the things in history that we don't understand from the past. It was like the whole of everything you don't understand in the world suddenly became clear. And that knowledge was quite phenomenal. And I have to say, I expected the next day the whole of the country to know about it. I couldn't believe it just happened to us on our own. Now, the same thing with the paranormal stuff. It took me a while to calm down from the UFO experience, but then I started having these other experiences. And my research also leads me to believe that the majority of people who have extremely close encounters go on to have other encounters of some description. They might become even healers, I don't know. Or
psychic phenomena.
Yeah, or instant writing. You know, I'm not going to knock any of these things. I would have done before the experience, but not since the experience. Because I do know there are things out there which are different to UFOs, but they somehow belong in the same world, because I've experienced these things. So somehow the UFO experience for me has brought along some other paranormal experiences. You're right, the word paranormal doesn't sound good, but I always say to people it's a science that we don't understand. Once we understand it, it'll all become a lot clearer. What's going on out there is technical, it is nuts and bolts, and it can be reproduced. We just don't understand it all at the moment.
And do you carry a camera around with you, Colin, in case it ever happens again?
Good question, good question. Now, after the experience, some of these other experiences I was having, I thought, I've got to get these on film. So I bought myself a digital camera. Now, the first one was a light in the sky that was stationary. I'd been watching it for a while, then it started to move, and it went through 90 degrees, and this is at night, and I thought, right, I'm going to film this one. I've got the camera on my side. By the time I'd lifted the camera to my eye, it had gone. Now that was the first time during all of this experience that I thought I was losing it. I thought I was going insane, that what I saw was inside my mind, but then I realised it wasn't. It was a proper light. The first UFO experience occurred. The problem I see with all of this now, that since my own experience to now, computer graphics have got so much better. There's some fantastic hoaxes on there.
Yeah.
And even if you came up with the real McCoy, people would still be knocking it and saying it's computer graphics, it's not the real thing. It's going to be very difficult these days, I think, to get photographic evidence that people are going to believe.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we need to have physical, tangible evidence. Like the old saying, we need them to land on the White House and come out and have a press conference.
Take a sample of their DNA.
Yeah.
All right, and Colin, well, do let me know if you do capture anything on your camcorder, because it'd be great to get something. But,
you'll be the first to know.
All right. Well, thanks very much for talking to me.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.